IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, Tuesday night edition. Had to get some breakdowns done for the premium members at Irish Breakdown boards at irishbreakdown.com. So I got a run breakdown up today. We'll have some more pass game and some defense stuff coming up here throughout the week, but lots of really good stuff. I felt it was one of the more fascinating breakdowns I've ever done of a run game, where the raw numbers were so good and the efficiency was so bad. So I break all that down. I have about a 20-minute video breaking down sort of the adjustments that were made. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 plays that go through the all 22, break down what A&M was doing that was giving Notre Dame problems, what they adjusted with, why they adjusted that way, how it affected Texas A&M, and why it worked. And so I have that on there as well. So I was working on that all day today. So I'm doing a little bit of a night show today. It's something unique. It's more of just a reaction to the time constraints I had today. Not going to be something we're going to do regularly, but I do know there's some people that are listening that don't normally get to listen. So we are glad to be able to hang out with you here tonight. But got a lot to talk about today, and going to dive first into a conversation about sort of what is next for Notre Dame. What do they have to prove? And then part 2 is going to kind of segue right into this weekend's preview, which is the Northern Illinois Huskies and what to expect and what Notre Dame has to do against the Huskies this weekend. So a lot going on, everybody. Before we get started, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. I've had a ton of signups to the message board the last couple of days. People are excited about Notre Dame. So make sure that you are not one of those people that gets left out of what we got going on at Irish Breakdown. So definitely go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and sign up for $99 a month, $49.99 annually. If you want to support us above and beyond the normal thing, we do have a booster club option. And if you sign up for one of the booster clubs, you get a little some free cool IB club stuff that is exclusive to club members. So check that out as well. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So everybody, I don't know if you guys heard all this, but Notre Dame has basically secured themselves a spot in the college football playoff after they went over Texas A&M. That's what I was told by ESPN. That's what I've been told by a lot of people, that just beating that one SEC team that most people picked between 7th and 9th in the SEC means Notre Dame has smooth sailing to the college football playoff. So there we go. So we're just going to go ahead and take the next, 11, 12 weeks off since Notre Dame doesn't have anything else to prove, apparently, and this is sort of the arrival moment for Notre Dame. Yeah, that's what they're saying, but that's, as the great Nick Saban has said, that is rat poison. That is them trying to build Notre Dame up so they can tear them down at some point in time later in the season. This football team still has a lot to prove and a lot to improve. And there's a lot we're going to learn about this football team here moving forward. And that's really something that the words Marcus Freeman uses to describe the goal, the best version of yourself, was it one play, one life, 12 unique opportunities, all those different things that he talks about are going to be very important that they get lived out here moving forward, because while I kind of mock the whole, and the funny thing is they're not really doing it in a way to praise Notre Dame. They're doing it in a way to kind of almost talk down Notre Dame. Well, they got this win. A&M may not be that good, but, they don't play anybody else. Everybody else stinks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then if Notre Dame doesn't blow out every opponent by 40, they can say, Notre Dame maybe not that good, and et cetera. They didn't beat this team who sucks and that team who sucks, and they don't play anybody and all this other kind of stuff. So you guys know that's what they're setting it up for. But for Notre Dame, the focus can't be on all of that. The focus needs to be on what Marcus Freeman always says the focus is on, which is you got to worry about us. His team needs to look in the mirror and say, we got to worry about us. That's what they need to say. Because it doesn't matter who the opponent is, and we've said this for a while too, Notre Dame needs to focus on Notre Dame because that's the what kind of roster they have. We said it this weekend about Texas A&M. It's definitely true of Northern Illinois. It'll be true of Purdue and Miami of Ohio and Louisville and Stanford and Georgia Tech and Navy and Florida State and Army and Virginia and USC. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But if Notre Dame plays their game, they will win the rest of their games. If they're the best version of themselves, they will win. But Notre Dame still has to prove that they can be that on a regular basis. So while everybody's excited about, the win over Texas A&M, and the Notre Dame players should take a sense of satisfaction from that win. This is no attempt to try to tell them, hey, that win didn't mean anything. It wasn't that big of a win. Any of that. This is not that at all. This is saying that, yes, this win was great. You did what you needed to do, but it was one win. Doesn't count for extra points because it was an SEC team. You don't get bonus points because it was on the road. You don't get bonus points because it's a 12-0 team. Or, I mean, a top 25 team. It simply counts as one win. It counts the same amount as it'll count if you beat Northern Illinois. One. That's it. And so the focus is, yes, we did what we needed to do that weekend. Now it's about getting better and taking that next step. Because look, this, like I said, this is not a finished football team. This isn't even close to a finished product on this football team. I mean, and as you break down the film, you realize that, like, goodness gracious. I mean, there's so much that this football team needs to improve upon. And you know who else that's true of? Every team in the country has a lot to improve upon right now. And so Notre Dame needs to make sure that they're not buying into the false hype meant to distract this football team that's being stated and publicly about how, you know, I heard somebody on ESPN and he was joking. I mean, he was being kind of funny, but then it kind of laid into, you know, talking down the schedule and all this other kind of stuff about how, you know, Notre Dame's the first team to clinch a spot in the playoffs. And again, it was another, you know, again, he was being funny and I thought he delivered it well. But the point was basically saying is, like, this is the hurdle that they have and nobody else is any good. Now we'll see kind of how USC goes through the season and if they start getting a little bit more respect. And some of those comments were made before USC. And then I've seen comments since, well, they don't play anybody until USC. And the reality is that's why this Texas A&M game was so big, guys. Look, I said this to multiple people before the game. I don't know if I said this in the show, but it's something that we talked about in different ways, which is, if you don't beat A&M, there's not another game on your schedule that's going to earn you respect or that is going to satisfy Notre Dame fans, and that's understandable. You lose to A&M, you're not going to get respect because you beat Louisville or Georgia Tech or Stanford or Florida State now. Maybe USC, but that's a team that you've kind of beat consistently in recent years. You've won 5 out of 6 against USC. I think 8 of the last 11 against USC. And so there's just no game that's going to give you that kind of respect. So you got the Texas A&M win. What you can't do now is take a step back, right? And so you have to go out there and prove yourself on a week-to-week basis and become the best version of yourself. Because I see Andrew Gilmore in the chat talking about Louisville. I think Louisville's really good. Andrew clearly thinks Louisville's very good. But can we all agree on one thing? You're not going to get respect for beating Louisville, right? You're not. You have to look good. Notre Dame is now going to have to focus on, just from a they're going to focus on, but the reality is in the eyes of the committee, there's going to be some style points that are going to be needed because they're not going to get that respect. So it has to be internal. That's the whole point. The push now is about what's inside. And do you have that competitive spirit where it's not so much about the opponent, it's more about, I wasn't the perfect, so I can go out and get better. And for Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff, the reality is you're going to have to focus on that message also. But let's be honest. If this coaching staff has the wisdom that I think that they have, they're going to have to find some things to try to motivate this football team moving forward. And whether it's disrespect from the outside, whether it's internal things that you look at, whether it's, setting certain goals, and no matter, you might have beat a team 50-3, but if you don't meet your goals and darn it, it's not good enough, we've got to go out and get better next week. They're going to have to find some ways to sort of motivate this football team for the next 3 games, especially this upcoming game, beyond just, we have to get better. That's got to be the foundation, but there needs to be a little bit more to it than that, because that's what we're going to have to do. And so when you look at this football team, here's another aspect of it as well, of what this team has to prove and what's left on their slate moving forward, including this weekend against Northern Illinois. Is this team went out this weekend and did something that a lot of people, including Notre Dame fans, didn't think they could do, or I should say that may not be a right way of saying it. Even people that thought they could and would win still recognized that it was the kind of game that Notre Dame hasn't won in the past, or a more rational view is it's not a game that they've consistently won or won enough. They clearly have won games like they had against Texas A&M, but you hadn't done it against an SEC team on the road because you hadn't really played one since Georgia in 2019. And before that, I think the last road game against an SEC team that Notre Dame played in the regular season, I think it was 04. I mean, Mike Goolsby was like a team captain on that team. I believe that team that Notre Dame that Goolsby played on back in 04, Brady and those guys was, I think, the last time Notre Dame played on the road against an SEC team prior to the Georgia game in 2019. And then, of course, this weekend's game. So, you had that opportunity. And what Notre Dame proved this weekend, not only did they prove they can win games like that, but they also proved that they can handle some adversity. They proved that they can go on the road in the heat. I said road game, guys. They've beaten lots of SEC teams, and they've beaten SEC teams away from home. They beat LSU twice in bowl games. I said road games, regular season road games. South Carolina was played in the state of Florida, and it was a bowl game. But the point is, what this game showed me is that this team can handle adversity. This team can handle being the underdog. They can handle being disrespected. They can handle going on the road in a tough environment against a very well-coached football team, a very talented football team, a competitive football team, and fall behind, right? You fall behind early, you tie it up, they take the lead again, you tie it up, you take a lead, they tie it up, and then you go down and handle business and put a team away. And there's an expression that we've used a lot here before in the past, or I should say a lot, that we've used at times in the past. And the expression goes like this. You've got to prove that you can handle adversity. Once you've done that, you then have to go prove that you can handle success. And what this Notre Dame football team is entering into right now, until some level of adversity hits, and I don't know that that's going to be possible for the next month until Louisville comes to town, is you've got to now prove you can handle success. You've got to prove that you don't have that, well, we got that big win, so now we can kind of coast for the next 3 weeks. Now, look, we've said this, right, on our end, these are get-right games for Notre Dame. We've said that, and that is true. But you as a football team can't practice like that. You can't think like that. You can't focus like that. The coaches can't focus like that. You've got to go out and say, hey, look, yes, we got this big win. That's great. But can we build on it? Can we make sure we don't lose this momentum that we have from this? Can we go out there and stay focused, stay on track, keep pushing ourselves? I want to see a guy like Riley Mills be excited about the win and then look at the film and say, hey, I got to get better here. I want to see Howard Cross do that. I want to see Xavier Watts do that. I want to see Benjamin Morrison say, hey, I only give up one completion for a yard, 5 attempts. I don't want to give up any completions for any yards. I want to see Christian Gray say, hey, yeah, I made some plays, but I got to use better technique there. I've got to make sure I do a better job of playing the ball here. And I want to see Jeremiah Love say, hey, I did a great job there, but I've got to do a better job, here and this missed opportunity here. And I want to see that across the board to where, yeah, they're happy with the win, but they're going to look at it and say, man, I got to get better. Right? That might have been good enough for this, but that's not the best I can be. And that's sort of Marcus Freeman's mantra. Like we'll say here in this show, that's not going to beat Georgia. Right? Like that's not going to beat Ohio State. You proved what you do when you play that way can beat Texas A&M. You proved that as a football team. Notre Dame proved that. But can they go out and then say, okay, but you got to take it to another level when you play the Bulldogs or the Buckeyes or, the Longhorns or the Crimson Tide, teams like that. Is that performance from Saturday good enough to beat those teams? The answer is no, it's not. But you can't say that as a football coach. You don't want to talk about Georgia because you've got Northern Illinois. And that's where I think Marcus Freeman's mantra of be the best version of yourself really holds, right? That matters because you now have set a target in front of you that's honestly, it's really hard to attain it. You may do it for a game, but there's a lot you got to look at and say, even when you have great games, say, hey, I can do better here. I need to do better there. And when your focus is on perfection, there's always room to get better. And that's going to have to be the focus. And that's where leadership is really going to come into play. Now, I'll be honest, I'm more confident that the leadership is in place to handle that because of how impactful the leadership was going down to Texas A&M and what everything that they went through down there. So, it's like, it gets to the point where the great teams never get satisfied. Christian Gray shouldn't be satisfied with the game he had on Saturday. Don Schuler should not be thinking about, man, I'm the dude. I had a pick. I made a bunch of tackles. I was laying dudes out. I had a really good game. He needs to be saying, God, how did I miss that play? I should have had another play there. I should have had a tackle for loss there. I got to do better there. I shouldn't have given up that completion. I got fortunate that guy didn't have situational awareness and field awareness and ran out of bounds short of the sticks. I didn't do that. He did that. I got to do better there. You need to see Bo Collins say, hey, man, I made that great catch, and that's all great, but, man, I can't – and I had a really nice crack block on Jay Love's 29-yard run, but I can't miss the first crack block. I can't drop that one ball that I dropped. I can't misrun this route. I've got to make sure I'm doing a better job, and that's got to be across the board. And that's where leadership comes, not just from a captain standpoint, but in every room to say, guys, good job this weekend, but we can and we will get better. And that's what this team has to prove, because if they can have that mentality, then you'll still see them on a steady growth. And let's be honest about something else, right? Notre Dame proved against A&M that they can beat a team like A&M, which in my opinion they have done before. I've said this before. I don't think A&M is that much better than NC State last year. I don't know that this A&M team is that much better than 2022 North Carolina that won 9 games. They're better on defense, but are they as good on offense as that North Carolina team was? It's very questionable. So I think they've beaten teams like this before. I do think the magnitude was different. The environment was very different. But what they haven't done is do it consistently. And we're now about to enter a period where Marcus Freeman's got to prove something as a football coach. And we've talked about this with Marcus Freeman. We've talked about this with Al Golden. We've talked about this with Al Washington. The coaches that are in kind of year 3. Yes, you had success in year 2. Great success in year 2 for certain guys. Al Washington did a great job last year. Al Golden did a great job last year. Year 1, not so good. Marcus Freeman did some good things last year. Proved as a coach that he can get his team ready to not only play, but to dominate inferior opponents. Like, they absolutely prove that. Last year, Notre Dame, against teams that were definitely beneath them, dominated. They won 10 games last year. Only one of those games was by less than 21 points. And that was on the road against a ranked Duke team, which is similar to Texas A&M, in my opinion, in certain ways. But you dominate. You beat Navy by, 46? Texas State by 53. NC State by, 20, 24. Beat Central Michigan by 24. You beat, trying to go through the schedule, USC by 28. You beat Pitt by 50. Was it 56? Can't believe I'm already forgetting some of the scores from last year. It's unacceptable by me. What was the final score? It was 50 of the Pitt game. It was 58-7. So 51. You beat Wake Forest. You beat NC State by 21. You beat Wake Forest by 38. You beat Stanford by 33, and you beat Oregon State by 32. Great job. But is that who Marcus Freeman's team is from now forever? Or are they similar to the team in 2022 that played way down to their competition at times? Are they the team that battled Ohio State for 60 minutes, but then didn't battle Marshall a week later? Northern Illinois is not that far off from Marshall in certain areas. And that same team went out and lost to a 3-9 Stanford team at home. Northern Illinois is a better football team than that 2022 Stanford team was. They struggled at home against UNLV. This Northern Illinois team is better than that. Purdue is better than that. Miami of Ohio is better than that. So in year 3, Coach Freeman needs to prove that his program is in a place where they don't look down their nose at teams and think they're just going to roll the ball out and go play. The hope is that they have enough veteran leadership to kind of pull the young guys along, because when you tend to worry about that when you have a lot of young guys on your team, because young guys don't quite have that maturity of, like, hey, we got to bring it every day. There's a level of, hey, we've arrived, and so the veteran leadership needs to make sure that doesn't happen. And so what else is there to prove for Notre Dame? What does a game like Northern Illinois mean? Well, it means a lot when you're talking about big picture, trying to look at who this football team is. And will they be able to go in and say, hey, listen, we're going to blow that team out? Because yes, they did that last year. Sure, great. I'm glad they did that last year. Let's be honest. The teams they played last year were not very good. And I don't just mean not good like they came from a smaller level. What I mean good is they just were pretty bad. Central Michigan was a 5-7 football team last year that was coming off of a 3-point win over New Hampshire and lost by 24 to Michigan State, who was not very good last year. They lost by Buffalo. They lost to Buffalo by the same amount of points they lost to Notre Dame. So, yeah, they got to get better. The last couple times Notre Dame has played a team like this that was good, they either got beat or it was competitive. Marshall beat them 2 years ago. Toledo almost beat them the year before that at home. And that wasn't even a great Toledo team. That Toledo team went 7-6. So you do have to prove, as if you're Notre Dame, that we're past the 2022 stuff. That's in the rearview mirror. This is now a team that shows up against those teams that are not that good or I shouldn't say not that good, because I do think Northern Illinois is a good football team, but clearly inferior to you and handle business. That's what Notre Dame is going to have to prove this weekend. And I think that's something that's at stake for them this weekend, is to show that they can be that kind of team. I also think that a game like this is very important for program development. And one of the things that drove me nuts about the previous coach's regime was there were so many games against opponents like this where they just kind of just let teams hang around way too long, and then they'd kind of run them off the field in the fourth quarter. And so then you couldn't get your younger guys in the way you needed to. I mean, you look at 2021, for example, you were blowing Florida State out. You're ready to run them off the field. One more stop and score, and you can get some of your backups in, and they kind of took their foot off the gas and let Florida State come back. Game goes to overtime. They hung around with Toledo, should have blown them out. There were several teams that year. USC, they should have blown out. Navy, they let hang around a little too long. Stanford, they kind of let hang around a little bit too long. They ended up getting some young guys in those games, but they just let them hang around too long. Look at 2020. Yeah, they let Duke hang around way too long. They let Florida State hang around way too long. They just, they didn't blow out Clemson or Georgia Tech the way that they should have. They didn't blow out Syracuse the way that they should have. They never put teams away in the ways they needed to. And it kept them from getting some of the work in that was needed. This needs to be a game where we see either Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr, right? Because that's got to happen after Steve Angeli gets his time. And so these are games where that's important as well. And I don't know how you emphasize that to your veterans, but somehow it needs to be understood that, hey, somebody in the chat, Ball State a couple years ago. It's another Vanderbilt that same season. That was 2018. That was a playoff. That was a playoff team for Notre Dame that beat Ball State by 8. Think about that. A playoff team at Notre Dame who beat Michigan by 7 the week before, followed that game up with a 8-point win over a Ball State team that finished that year 4-8 and lost to Indiana by 28 points the very next game, lost to Ohio by 38 points and Toledo by 32 points and Miami of Ohio by 21 points. Notre Dame beat them by 8. Week later, Notre Dame beat a Vanderbilt team that finished 6-7 by 5 and was an Alohi Gilman strip at the goal line of potentially losing that game. Those were the things that were so maddening previously, and it was maddening in 2022 under Marcus Freeman. Last year, they pretty much controlled. Maybe they could have done a little better in the first half against some of those teams. Fair. But they got to show that they can go out there and be that football team. They can go out there and just bury a team early and then, let those guys get behind you. I'm not saying you need to beat Northern Illinois by 50. I'm not saying that. I mean, you do need to win convincingly, though. And I like this Northern Illinois team. We're going to get into Northern Illinois here in a little bit. And I'm going to kind of give you talk about some of the things I like, and I'll dive more into the matchups tomorrow and talk about some of the things that I like about this team and what they can do and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk plenty about Northern Illinois, including tonight. But this is still a team that when you're a top 10 team, you should beat handily. I'm just being honestly. So that's obviously another aspect of what Notre Dame has to prove this weekend, right? And continue to show that you're that 2023 version of yourself. Don't make it. And I'll say this too. It's even more important now. I wanted to get into this part as well. It's always been important to kind of beat those teams the way you're supposed to get opportunities to get reps for younger players. And I don't think this staff did a great job of getting guys in as early as they should have last year enough. Maybe I think that'll change. I mean, they're already getting some of those guys in now. But this is especially true now in the 16-game playoff era, which is what Notre Dame has to play to win a title. You have to be able to take 15, 20 snaps off of Howard Cross's legs and Riley Mills's legs and Jack Kaiser's legs and Riley Leonard's legs and, Xavier Watts' legs in a game like this. You need to keep their snaps in the 30s and 40s for the skill players and hopefully in the 20s for your defensive linemen. Because, look, what does Jack Kaiser have to prove in a game like this? Nothing. But you also just can't not play him until you've got that game in hand. Same with Riley Mills, Howard Cross, guys like that. Some of the veterans, like an R.J. Oben, maybe, I would say I'd want to leave in them more just to get him a little bit more acclimated. But some of those other guys, you don't have anything to prove in those games. And so this is a great opportunity for not only team development, but also load management when you're thinking about projecting to a 16-game season. And if you don't put a team away, then you've got to stay and play the reps and do what you got to do to win that football game. And that's another aspect where going into games, like moving forward, if you have a step back mentally, if you have a step back from a focus standpoint, if you have a step back from an intensity standpoint, a chip on your shoulder standpoint, like I want to see this team play ticked off all year. I want to see this team kind of takes even some of the quote unquote respect they're getting and be like, man, you guys are giving us backhanded compliments, which some people are, not everybody, but I heard Joel Klatt talk about it. I mean, Joel Klatt was very impressed with what he saw from Notre Dame. Other people kind of gave him a backhanded compliment. Like, yeah, you beat A&M, but maybe A&M's not good, and the rest of your schedule sucks, and so whatever. I'm like, okay, we got something for you guys. But it's also about you've got to do this to make sure that you're not playing an unnecessarily high number of snaps in games where you just shouldn't be playing a high number of snaps. And that's something else that Notre Dame's going to have to prove, not just in this game, but really over the next 3 games, for your next 5 games, really, if you want to be honest about it when looking at Stanford is kind of that way as well. So those are different aspects of it, of what I want to see from Notre Dame and when it comes to what this team still has to play for. There's also specific things that you have to still prove as a team. And I'll be honest with you, if Notre Dame would have beaten Texas A&M the way they could and should have, hit some of those early plays, don't have those misses, win this game 34-13, something like that. I don't know that I'd feel great about the offense coming in this game because I don't know what it is, but offensive teams sometimes, when they come off really good games, kind of sleepwalk the next week. And I always think about the Virginia game in 2015, where you go out in the opener and you just destroy Texas. And, I mean, play about as perfect of a game as you can play. I think Malik Zaire went something crazy like 18 of 21 for over 300 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns, and they ran all over Texas. I mean, they played in a lot of ways, not flawless, but about as close to flawless as you can get in an opener against a team, like a brand like that. And then came out the next week against Virginia, and they just kind of let Virginia hang around, and they had some misses of things they shouldn't have missed on, and just didn't play at the same fire and focus they did the week before. against Texas, and that same team that absolutely annihilated Texas in the opener, 38-3, kind of hung around with Georgia Tech. You have a lead, then you let them get a couple onside kicks, and then I think wasn't the UMass game something like 28-20 with like I think a minute, 2 minutes to go in the first half. And see, I'm actually looking that score up now. I think CJ Sanders returns a punt for a touchdown. Yeah, it was 28-20. No, it was 21-20. Notre Dame was winning 21-20 against UMass, who was 0-2 coming into that game, who was terrible coming into that game. It was 21-20 with over 3 minutes left. UMass punts. CJ Sanders runs it back 50 yards, makes it 28-20. And then Notre Dame scored its touchdown with 6 seconds left to go up 35-20. And then they rolled in, winning 62-27. But you had CJ Prosise, scoring a touchdown in the third quarter. Like that game should have been 42-7 at halftime, but you let them hang around because you weren't low focused. You weren't locked in. You weren't doing the things that you needed to do. You basically just beat them on talent. Will Fuller, who just dominated people that year, only had 4 catches for 57 yards against UMass, right? Those are just things where you weren't locked in, you weren't focused the way that they were when they played some of the better teams on their schedule. And that's going to be something where this team won't be able to kind of have that sort of mentality. So you kind of look at it from I didn't love what we saw from the offense from an execution standpoint and efficiency standpoint. There's a lot of things they got to clean up, penalties wise and timing and tempo and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of a blessing in disguise when you're projecting forward because they're not going to be in there. Like the O-line's going to maybe feel good about themselves for like a day because of how they finished that game. But then when they go, and they probably did this yesterday, if not Sunday, if they didn't do it then, they did it Monday. They're going to go through the film and realize, oh my gosh, we got to get a lot better. Same thing with Riley Leonard. Same thing with the running backs and receivers. So there's going to be a little bit extra something behind the coaching staff this week about, hey, yeah, we did what we needed to do to get the win, and that's something you guys deserve to be praised for. But guys, fellas, this ain't good enough for what we're trying to get to. You guys can and should play a lot better than that. So I actually feel like they're going to have a chance to kind of come out clicking this week, but you kind of need to because there's a lot you got to get better at. As a team, you need to show more discipline with the penalties, and that's certainly true on offense. But Notre Dame's offense has to get better in a hurry because, they're certainly a better team than Purdue, but Purdue's no slouch this year. And yeah, you've got a couple, 3 get-right games here, 2 get-right games, and then a game against Purdue, which is a game you should win, but, not a game you can sleepwalk through and win convincingly. But you got a team coming into town in the end of September. It's going to be a really good football team that you're not going to, if you score, you scored 20 against them last year and lost by 13. You're going to have to be able to score and put this team away. And so they're going to have to get better in a hurry. And there's some areas where they have to get better. The offensive line still needs a lot of work from a chemistry standpoint. There's a lot of work needed from an execution standpoint. They almost doubled their career starts from last week, but they still only have 11. There's a lot of room for improvement there. Timing in the pass game really needs a ton of work. Riley Leonard and timing is kind of twofold. Timing is the quarterback's progressions going through the pocket. Riley was way too fast going from read to read last week. And I felt like there were times where if he would have stuck to the read for another second, he would have had some guys coming open that he could hit for big plays. And so he's going to have to, that's an area of improvement for him that he's going to have to focus on this week. Receivers are going to have to do a better job winning at the line of scrimmage this week. They're going to have to do a better job being a little bit sharper, having a little bit more sense of urgency as route runners. They're going to have to do a better job of consistency in blocking. They had some really good blocks on Saturday, some really bad blocks on Saturday. And then timing is also, Riley getting a better feel for, okay, when and how to get the ball out and where to put the ball and those type of things. So certainly a lot of need for that. They have to be more aggressive in the pass game. I want to see that this upcoming week. I want to see them find some vertical answers. So that's certainly something that Notre Dame still has a lot to prove here over these next 3 games. Efficiency in the run game. I'm going to show you guys something. So I'm just going to give you a little taste here of the breakdown I did for Notre Dame's game against Texas A&M. So This is just a small sample. There's 4 graphs like this, plus about almost a 20-minute video breaking it all down. But I broke down every play and type in all the data, and I break the game down. And as you look at that sheet right there, I included Jadarian Price's 37-yard run in that. I took out the hold that Cooper Flanagan had, and I explained there in the breakdown. But here's the deal. When you look at those numbers, the raw numbers are great. 29 carries, 204 yards, 7.0 yards per play, per carry, 2 touchdowns along a 47. But then that final number is the efficiency numbers. Those are basically plays where you win. A good performance, not a great performance, but a good performance is when you're at about 60% efficiency. Notre Dame was at 37.9 efficiency in that game. You look at their success on first down. Yeah, the numbers look great. 17 carries, 134, right? But then look at the efficiency, 41.2. That's not where you need to be. Third down, 0 for 2 on third down. 1 of 2 on fourth down. You need to be perfect on fourth down. Now, you and I would argue that they got that fourth down spot, but that play could have been blocked a lot better and not been put in the hands of the officials. Certainly could have done that. And that's something that Notre Dame's going to have to get better at. So while there was a very good step in the right direction, these numbers show that Notre Dame has to get a lot better. So I did want to give a little sample. This is just to let you guys know. This is premium board member stuff only. I'm just giving you guys a little bit of a taste here to back up the point that I'm making. But this is a much more thorough breakdown. And as I said, there's also a 20-minute video with clips, all 22 clips from the game and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of shows you what I'm talking about, though, right? I mean, that shows you the errors they got to get better. And there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's what the focus needs to be on this for this football team. And here's the thing, too. They show that they can finish really well. Notre Dame controlled like I was talking to somebody, they asked me about how the environment was at A&M. I said it was a great environment. I mean, loud crowd, into it. The chants are kind of weird, but it's also partly you love the excitement they have, and I mean the press box was shaking the whole game. I said, well, it wasn't shaking the whole game. It was shaking for the first 54 minutes of the game. It wasn't shaking for the last 6 minutes, because the last 6 minutes Notre Dame dominated. And now you need to show that, yes, you can do that, but you got to learn to start faster as well offensively, because, yeah, it worked against A&M, but it may not work against Georgia. It may not work against Ohio State. It may not work against Texas. It may not work against Alabama. It may not work against Louisville. It may not work against USC. So they're going to have to be a much better team in order to be able to dominate the way that this team should and could dominate offensively. So there's a lot to get better on that, get better at on that side of the ball. And then finally, defensively, look, it's a good early win. They played really well in a lot of areas, but 3 areas that I want to see this team still get better at when you talk about what can they do to improve and get better as a football team and continue to make a big statements. Number 1, get better tackling. This Northern Illinois game is perfect for Notre Dame, because, yes, it's a game you could control, but there's 2 to 3 kids on this Illinois offense that are legit good. And I'll dive into it when we get into the Northern Illinois breakdown. But there's some kids at running back, they got a kid at receiver, and they got a kid at tight end that are good football players, really good football players. And not just MAC level players. Like, not would I have them transfer to Notre Dame? No, but they could play for a lot of teams in the Power 5 level. And they're going to put you in some stressful situations schematically. So this is a great game to get better at tackling. And they're going to need that for for next week against Purdue. And they're definitely going to need that against Louisville and USC down the road. So this is actually a great opponent for you to improve on the thing that you were probably worst at on Saturday, which is tackling. And the reason I say this is a good opponent for that, because when you play a team that's just not athletic and not very good, you can get a false sense of security on who you are. Yeah, we tackled all them, but they're not very good. The reason it matters that, Artario Brown and the kids that they have, Trayvon Rudolph and guys like that for Northern Illinois are good football players that make you work, is because if you're shut them down, you kind of had to do something that then builds for what you've got to do against even better opponents down the road. So that's a very, very important thing, in my opinion, for this Notre Dame defense. They also have to, obviously, the linebackers still need to continue to grow and develop. More consistency is needed. Tons of flash plays. Like if I took the 10 best plays that we saw from the linebackers, Jalen Sneed flying out to the flats, Jalen Sneed crashing the backside on a goal line play, Drake Bowen blowing dudes up, Kings Viliama-Asa making plays in space, blowing dudes up, Jack Kaiser being where he needs to be, Jaden Alsbury blowing things up. You'd be looking at linebackers, and they played great. And it's okay. Well, now let me show you the 10 worst plays of the linebackers. And you're like, man, they got to get a lot better. And that's a good place to be. Guys, when you hold a Power 5 team that's a legitimate top 25 team to 246 yards of offense and only 303.6 yards per play, and you look at as many things that Notre Dame's got to get better at, that's that's a great place to be, but you still have to get better. And so the linebackers have to get better. And then I want to see the D-line make more plays. This is a very experienced Northern Illinois offensive line. It's a very good MAC offensive line, and you're going to have to work. You're not just going to be able to walk out there and say, hey, let's go do our thing and just roll the ball out, and they're going to cower to you. They've got some size on that O-line at certain spots, and they're veterans. I think 4 returning starters. They're a good MAC offensive line, one of the better MAC offensive lines in 2024. So the D-line is going to have to be on top of their game. So when I look at Notre Dame and you ask what's there still to play for, what do they have to prove? Everyone's anointing them as they've locked the playoff berth and all this kind of stuff. Nope, they're not there yet. You had a great win, but you've got to have 11 more, which means there's a lot of room to get better, a lot of need to get better if this team is not only going to make the college football playoff. Because here's the deal, guys. The goal is not to make the playoff. The playoff is a means to an end. You can't get to your ultimate goal if you don't make the playoff. That's kind of that focus. You got to get there, but what you're building towards is not to get to the playoff. It's not, Latimer from the program, starting defense, place at the table, smash your head into a window because that's the moment you've, quote unquote, arrived. It's like, okay, well, you've arrived, but now what are you going to do? And the whole thing that we've all talked about, Notre Dame goes 12-0 and loses in the first round of the playoffs. Are any of you really feel like, hey, this team turned a corner? No, we've done that before. We've seen that before, right? We've been down that road with Notre Dame. Went 12-0 in 2012, got their butts kicked in the postseason. Went 12-0 in 2018, got their butts kicked in the postseason. Went 10-0 in the regular season in 2020, got their butts kicked twice in the postseason that year, right? So it getting to the playoff isn't the ultimate goal for Notre Dame. That might be what everybody's talking about now. But even if Notre Dame does have a much easier path to the playoff than most top teams, and I think that's fair to say, I think Notre Dame's path to the playoff is probably cleaner than just about every team in the top 10. But that doesn't mean, A, that it's easy, or B, that you can just kind of roll the ball out and win all of them. Because if you win 12-0, go 12-0 just because you're better than everybody else, but you don't actually develop as a team, then you're going to find yourself falling short once you actually get to the playoff. And getting a home playoff game is going to be great, but that's just step one towards the ultimate goal. It's not the end-all, be-all, and that's why you need to improve. You can't rest on what you did against A&M. It just was a step, and that's going to be a big thing, and that's certainly what Notre Dame has to prove, and that what the focal point should be for Notre Dame this weekend when they go to play Texas A&M. Or, excuse me, when they go play Northern Illinois. So I'm going to get to, speaking of Northern Illinois, I'm going to get to a breakdown of the Huskies next. We're going to dive into their season and kind of who they are and what they've done, and going to pull up some stats here of this football team and talk about kind of what I like and some areas where, just give you an overview of who they are and I'm going to use last year's stats to kind of show what they did last season, talk about, what they do offensively and defensively and get into those type of things and a little about their personnel. And of course, tomorrow during the midweek rundown, I'll dive even more into that with some of the stats breakdowns and different things tomorrow. So we'll dive even deeper into it. But here next, I'm going to give sort of an introductory look at Notre Dame's next opponent, which is the Northern Illinois Huskies.